big issues right now in the United States is Biden's decision to raise the tax rate from 37% to 39.6%. This would be a top marginal income rate, meaning the very wealthy at the very top, the 1%, would be paying 2.6% more taxes. And that this would also apply to single file makers of more than $400,000 and married couples with incomes exceeding $450,000 a year. And that there would also be capital gains on the same rate as regular income if those earning $1 million are close to the so-called carried interest loophole, being this thing that allows wealthy investment fund managers to essentially pay a lower tax rate than everyday workers. The thing about this is, I'm assuming this actually is going to pass, and I don't think this is the Build Back Better that we've been hearing about. The main reason that he wants to do this is so that Medicare and Social Security can be better funded for the 2024 budget. But somehow I get the feeling that that's not what this is about. I get the distinct feeling this really has more to do with Ukraine, because there's been an astronomical amount of money going into that conflict in order to fight Russia. Now, this is not to take sides, because I don't support either side in this conflict, but there is a very large amount of U.S. tax dollars going into this conflict to fight Putin, to defend the U.S. empire against the rising Russian empire, Eurasian, or whatever term it is that you want to use. I think that's what's really going on here. I would not be surprised if there was no significant increase in Medicare or Social Security during the time period in which this budget actually goes through. I think this is really about paying for the war, because that largely has been just a gigantic sinkhole for United States dollars and many of the dollars of its allies, including my own Canada. But I think there's also a bigger, not really a bigger, but another angle to this, that, aside from the fact that it was Trump who lowered it to 37, and now Biden's putting it back up. I think one of the problems is that there always is the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and we can see this over very long-term trends. Very much is real, and we even saw this from Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st century. Although he said Marx was wrong because Marx was wrong, and then proceeded to prove him correct about the tendency of the rate of profit to fall over the long term. But I digress. And I think that's going to be a problem here, and that in certain corporate tax rates, that is going to hinder that situation even further. I mean, there's already a question of profitability in most sectors as it is, because we're still suffering from the COVID lockdown that, despite what anyone may say, was still absolutely very necessary, and if anything was a demonstration of how capitalism cannot actually handle a health crisis such as that. I mean, you stop buying things, all of a sudden everything crashes. The so-called unimportant bottom level people who don't matter are the ones that had to go to work, that became essential workers, and a nice big thank you, but still treat you the same terrible way we always have, while the wealthy elite, the most important of the important people, didn't have to go to work. And it taught us a very important lesson. I think that there's maybe some bit of, not just anger, I mean, there's always anger among the bourgeoisie when you raise the tax rate on them, but I think there's going to be just a little bit more this time, if, given the difficulty in the current rate of profit, not necessarily massive profits, but the rate on the return of profits in this situation. I think it's going to be a little bit worse in that regard. But I also suspect that some members of the bourgeoisie, probably the more liberal leaning, are going to be very supportive of this, given that they know this money really isn't going to go to the poor. It's actually going to go to Ukraine to fight Putin, and that's a very serious, important thing to them, not the people who need food and medicine. So, I wouldn't be surprised if this passed. There's definitely going to be some pushback against it. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it didn't go through either, because these things still go up for debate, and all sides have to sign on them, and there's an unending argument with basically everything, particularly when it comes to taxing the rich. So I think that this dimension of this war in Ukraine getting just maybe a little bit too expensive for the United States is probably a much greater factor here than about maybe anything else in this situation. And I think that's the real thing we got to keep an eye on in this situation.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.